by immigrants. But again, to repeat the point I made earlier, this is only one side of the issue, the movement of highly skilled people from developing countries to the developed, which of course simultaneously prevents developing countries being able to emulate that process. But the other process is the outsourcing. And that is fascinating. That is to say, the movement of activity from the developed countries to the developing. We all know about China and the massive movement of manufacturing, light manufacturing, etc., now increasingly skill-intensive to China. In India, we know all about IT, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai, Mumbai, Gurgaon, etc., which are becoming global centres of IT. There's a division of labour between the relatively high research, high-tech sector and what the Indians are doing, but nonetheless you can see this spread taking place and different kinds of outsourcing. People always used to say, but that's for what economists call tradable goods, but there are untradable ones. Well, are there untradable ones? That's an interesting question, because I not long ago read the McKinsey report on medical services in India, where they estimate that 130,000 foreigners are treated in Mumbai's hospital every year. That is to say, Mumbai is now beginning to pull people in medical services. People are going to have their operation in India, where it costs 10% of what it does in New York. So again, you've got new patterns of specialization emerging here in outsourcing. The same goes with higher education. I'm fascinated how some of the leading universities of the world are starting campuses abroad, whether in Dubai or Shanghai, and similarly with schools. That is to say, Dulwich College in the southeast London has opened a campus in Bangkok and a campus in Shanghai, etc., etc. So the process is two-way. It's not bringing children to schools in Britain, it's sending schools from Britain to the third world. So we must constantly look at this process as the other side of the coin to immigration. Are there dangers? Are there dangers in the present process, the present financial collapse? There are. Some European leaders, who shall remain nameless, have rejoiced. How wonderful. The state is back in the driving seat. We are going to claw it back. I will not see a France that does not make motor cars, that does not make ships, that does not do manufacturing. Why? If the Chinese can do it better, let it send it to the Chinese. But so governments are indeed trying to reverse globalization, and with some emergency success, in the sense of the advance of state capitalism to underpin the banking system, is a major reaffirmation of the priority of national political power against a mobile economy. I don't think they'll win. The forces of the governments are required to secure economic growth, and in doing so, they are required to return to the process of globalization. Governments, of course, on the political level, the political rhetorical level, are everywhere talking about this favourite phrase that Gordon Brown in Britain dug a hole and fell into it. British jobs for British workers. And of course in Brussels they said, outrageous, you are fighting against Europe. And then America did the same, foreigners may not be employed on public contracts, etc., etc. So there's a lot of straws in the wind here about the attempt to fight globalization, to prevent the redistribution of income, which is implicit in globalization. Now, that's the substance of what I want to say economically. And I return now, come to the last question, integration. The trouble with the migration debate is that it's still in the feudal context of people having places where they belong. And so migration is a disturbance of where they belong. They can't move about and not belong, and governments are determined to force them to belong. That's how the debate about integration arises, because of treating all migrants as actual or potential settlers, not workers who circulate. Implicit in what I've been saying about a global economy is a circulating labour force, in which if you ask people, where do you belong, they won't have an answer. I belong where I am. I belong here, there, and everywhere. I've belonged in 32 different places in the last 10 years. Why? What does it matter? The economics of the situation are washing away nationality, and that is what governments are resisting. So, governments are at the moment making all sorts of adjustments, and you have to read the fine print of the successive immigration laws of the United States and in Europe to see the fine print where they try to reconcile the need for circulating skilled workers with the need to tie the population down, to identify it. So the integration debate is about people joining the club of the nation, not about responding to work opportunities and circulating, but joining the club of the nation, which is supposedly privileged. And many people are under the illusion that it is privileged, but never mind, we don't need to go into that. Hence, it's a political question, again, rather than an economic question about what workers are required. And in trying to defend that system of, in quotes, feudalism, of serfdom, arises the immense furore over vetting people, new entrants, growing periods of probation, the density of requirements, etc., etc. But unfortunately, there's nothing in the cupboard. There's a vacuum in the middle. And that arises from the problem of saying, what is the nation? In reality, it's the accident of where the borders were drawn. If you got caught on the wrong side when the borders were drawn, you may be a German or Dutch or English or whatever, but it is an accidental process, a byproduct of the squabbles of kings and the wars that they fought over their borders. And there are lots of people in Europe who got caught on the wrong side. You see Alsace-Lorraine, full of Germans who think they're French, etc., etc. I won't bore you with it, but it is a purely political accident. But nonetheless, it's led to this definition of the nation, and from that flowing a concept of identity, that everybody must have a national identity. That is, they have to have a state. The trouble is defining the nation, and thereby the criterion of membership, is extremely difficult. And we see there are really it requires satirists to describe the discussions in the United States about what is an American. It's wonderful. Or in the less developed debate in Britain about what is it to be British. Oh, it's a terrible question. And leads to all sorts of silliness because it is, at the end, impossible. And nobody will admit that it's an accident of birth. It is as if we all chose to be what we are and thereby embraced a set of values. So there are here two extremes. The nation is a community of values or a common culture that all accept. The trouble is that in practice you can't identify it. That is to say, you cannot identify something acceptable to all the native born. Or the alternative one, the liberal position, is all who live under a common body of laws in the club until they're changed are entitled to the prerogatives of membership. So the problem with the first definition is it is impossible to state the common values that supposedly the native-born share. And this is a wonderful debate. Because, to exaggerate, all English people are beautiful, kindly, sensible, rational,